Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on what part of the world you're visiting us. Hi, I'm Daniel Marcos, CEO of Growth Institute, and I'm the host of the podcast Learning Up, where we're helping leaders like you be able to scale your company by first learning yourself and scaling yourself as a leader, scaling your team so you could really scale your company. We really believe that learning is what scales companies. Of course, whatever you need and the tools that you use today are not going to take you to a next level. You have to learn new tools, grow your mindset to be able to, of course, then take your company to a next level. And today we have this amazing call with Tiffani Bova. She's the Global Customer Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce, and she's the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Growth IQ. Over the past 2 decades, she has led large revenue-producing divisions at several businesses, startups and Fortune 500s, and her research, she's a research fellow at Gartner, where she has helped companies like Microsoft, Cisco, Salesforce, Hewlett-Packard, IBM, and a lot of the big ones to really understand their sales, attack better market share, and of course, grow their revenues. She has been nominated 2 times to the Thinkers 50 list, and she has a podcast, and she has a new book called The Experience Mindset that she's going to publish soon. First, what is Growth IQ? Tell us about your first book.
Oh, my first book is sort of paying homage to the decade of me being an advisor at Gartner for startups and Fortune kind of 10 or even Fortune 1 companies on how to optimize the way they grow the business. And through thousands of conversations, I sort of distilled it into 10 very distinct growth paths. And so Growth IQ is trying to help organizations understand that growth is a thinking game. That's sort of the first one. The second one is the one thing about growth is it's never one thing. So if you keep those 2 things in mind, Growth IQ kind of creates a framework by which you can navigate those 10 growth paths at any given time to give you more clarity on the strategy you will use to grow your business.
So you have to choose one of these paths and then you have to execute it. And in the book, you give people the knowledge on how to really attack and understand which is the right path for them.
Yeah, I would say there's kind of the framework is threefold. One is what's the context of your market? So what's going on in your current market, whether that's region, industry, size, what is the context? What's happening with your customers? What's happening internally? What are you capable of doing? All the things that set the scene for then which growth path you decide to go down. But as I just said, the one thing about growth is it's never one thing. So rarely, I'd have to say never, is it ever just one growth path. It's a combination of growth paths, and that's what you have to decide. There's a couple that are pretty constant. Customer experience, optimizing the way you sell, and then taking care of your existing customers. Those 3 are fairly constant. The other ones are the ones that you really choose from. And then the third sort of part of the framework is what I call sequence. That means the order in which you do things has measurable and meaningful impact to your ability to be successful. So do you do this first or that first? And that decision, does play a role in how successful you're able to be. So those 3 things, context, combination, and sequence of those 10 growth paths is what the book really helps you figure out what's best for you.
Love it. And why you felt that you need to write the second book, The Experience Mindset, and when is it coming?
Yeah, so it's coming June 2023, June 6th to be exact, but it's up for pre-sale now. So go pick up your copy. Growth IQ is translated into 10 languages. So the hope is that, and it's in Spanish, Portuguese, and others across Europe. And so I am hopeful that the Experience Mindset will do the same thing. But I had no interest, honestly, in writing a second book. The first one was difficult for me. I'm not a writer in that way. I am now, but I was not through the first book. And I would say, in kind of full transparency, one of the growth paths I missed in Growth IQ was the power of employee and the role that they play in actually providing the opportunity for companies to grow. And the pandemic really, over the 2 years, shined a light on the lack of investments we'd been making across the employee base, if you will. And so the experience mindset is this combination of having extremely good employee satisfaction and employee experience, delivers increased customer satisfaction and customer experience. And when you get those two things right, the sort of operating flywheel that you get from that delivers greater growth rates than if you only had one of those two things working successfully.
So let me go back to the team.
Yes.
How do you really select the right team, and how do you grow the team and keep them engaged on selling? We know it's hard to really keep them engaged and get the right team members. Everyone complains about not finding the right team members.
Yeah, and it's a great question, because we did some global research actually, and we asked employees and we asked the C-suite, what are the things that are holding your companies back from achieving growth? And tied for number one for the employee was keeping and retaining talent. That talent leaves too often. And so as a team member, there are people who are left behind, right? A high-performing team member, a manager, a colleague leaves the team, and it is disruptive to the team dynamics, right? They might have been the lead on a project. They might have been the one everyone went to get questions answered, right? They might have been one who was a really solid manager. We've all heard that people, don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so if it was a manager that left, that disruption has an impact on performance of individuals, right? Like, wait a second, should I continue working here? Like, that person was so great and was such a huge impact to this business, and they left. Should I leave? What's going on, right? That uncertainty. So having strong team cohesion is really important. So what that being number one from an employee perspective, and I'm doing this from memory, but it was like number 3 or 4 for the C-suite, and what they thought was really impactful. So that dynamic is really important. So what keeps people within the organization, we also uncovered was, am I being rewarded for what I'm doing? Am I getting recognized for what I'm doing, right? Am I being given the right tools and training and learning curriculum so that I can stay on top of what is expected of me? Is there alignment between what I'm doing and what the company expects me to do? So a lot of it was, I want to know what my role every day, what I do, plays a part in the success of the company. And I see what I do through our customers' eyes, and I see what I do has impact to revenue. And if you can get that kind of commitment and satisfaction from your employees, then you reduce attrition for people leaving, especially high-performing talent from leaving, and you keep those teams really cohesive.
So that was the part of the team in sales. Now let's go about the tactics and the strategy. How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends in sales? There's a different sales book coming out every week. Like, how do you keep on track, and what works, what doesn't work, and all of this?
Oh, Daniel, that's a full-time job in and of itself, right? But I'm gonna be a little simplistic here in what I'm about to
Please.
say. Yeah, that companies simplistically, right, do two things. They make stuff and they sell stuff, like being very simple, right? Yep. You may not make it, someone else might make it for you, but I think you get the point, right? You have something, and then you're trying to sell whatever that 100%. Something is.
100%.
And if you look back in sort of the sales strategies over time, if I were to ask the question, when were demos first kind of, I'm going to use the word invented, but in the classic kind of business sense. I don't mean demoing, your hammer back in the Stone Ages, right? I mean, in the business sense, right? Demonstrations, or I want to sell an outcome. I want to show you how this will improve your business. So really that kind of outcome-based or solution selling. We're gonna play a little game here, Daniel. So you're gonna have to play along with me. So what year do you think was the first time that kind of approach was formalized? At least that we know of. When was it formalized? Pick a year. We're in 2023, so pick a year.
2005.
Okay. No, go back. Keep going.
1985.
Keep going.
Oh, wow. 1972.
Keep going. So the point is, it was in the late 1800s, literally.
What?
It was the head of sales for a company called NCR, National Cash Register. I wanted to get people out of their small businesses and take them to see the power of what a cash register could do for them to track their sales, to track their money, and to understand what was happening in their business. That head of sales had a last name of Watson. And if you know anything about technology
IBM,
history, he was one of the founders of IBM. And so you could say in the 1900s, right, all the way from the early 1900s until like pretty much the late 70s, early 80s, people would often say you won't get fired for buying IBM. And their sales teams were held up as the best sellers in the business. That's correct. And so going back to
songs and how they have to dress, and it was crazy.
Right. And back then it was mostly men. So we'll give them a pass on that. We'll give them a pass on that. But I will say that, so going back to your question, how do I stay on top of it? Because in reality, what's new is old, right? It's old is new, right? And so a lot of the jobs to be done in selling has always remained constant, right? I find a customer, that's constant. I try to sell you, that's constant. I try to add value, that's constant. I have to compete against what someone else has that's similar to mine. All of those things are constant. What changes and what has changed is the solution by which we sell. Meaning, we used to sell face-to-face. I used to knock on your door at home and sell a vacuum cleaner. I used to knock on your door at home and sell books, which that used to be almost all women back in the early 1920s. And so what has changed now is I don't knock on your door. I send you an email. I send you a text, right? I might chat with you on a social platform. So the solution of me, quote unquote, knocking on the door has changed, but the act of knocking on the door, if you take it literally, right, has remained constant. So the one thing about sales and trying to keep up, and really anything from an innovation standpoint, is always anchor on that job to be done. It's very hard for you to find a job to be done that wasn't around 100 years ago. What has changed is that solution by which that job is delivered. Take Blockbuster. You know, in the US, we used to have to drive to get a video, right? So the job to be done was to entertain my family on a Friday night. We want to watch a movie. That's the job. I'm either going to watch TV or I'm going to drive to a Blockbuster and get it. What do we do now? We can stream it. So the job to be done was, I want to entertain my family on a Friday night, has not changed. How I do it, I'm streaming it from my phone and casting it to the TV. That solution has changed, but the job of entertaining my family on a Friday has remained constant. So if you can land on the job to be done, you will start to see that what you have to keep on top of is how the solutions are changing, not the jobs. Interesting.
Okay, and they evolve using new technologies or new mediums or whatever, but it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah. You may come to me and go, oh, this one thing, because something was invented, right, that changes and creates a new job. I get it. But if you're talking about business, you know, making something used to be manual and now it's automated. The job was still making something, how you do it, right? How you get something from point A to point B, you know, carrier pigeon, you know, horse and buggy and carriage, right? To a train, to a car, to an autonomous car, to a drone. I'm still getting something from A to B. What changed is the solution. Yeah.
Very cool. So you're talking to a business owner, let's say doing 5-10 million. They are already kind of understood, but the company has been, let's say, has been growing because of pure determination of the founder. And now they really want to build a team and then growth engine and really structure the business. How do you go about this? Like, where do you start to really start building an engine for growth?
Yeah, it's a great question because, you know, in Growth IQ, I talk about growth stalls. I talk about how the majority of small businesses will never get larger than 5 million. It's a very small percentage of businesses that get larger than 5 million, really, collectively.
It's around 3%.
Exactly, which means they're either not able to scale over 5. Now, listen, some owners, some small business owners might be 5 million is a great size business for me. I have work-life balance. It pays the bills. My kids are going to school. Like, I don't want to grow it bigger than 5 million. So put those aside and let's look at the ones that actually want to scale and get to 10 and maybe get to 20 and continue scaling from there. The comment I would make is, what helped them get to the first 5? What was it? and really, I like to say, deconstructing that business that got them to 5, almost being an anthropologist of your own company. Why did we win? Where did we win? Who did we win with? What kinds of people did we have employed when we were winning? What tools were we using when we were winning? And really look at it in a very constructive way where you're understanding what worked then may not work now. Either the market has moved, the competition has gotten more stiff, your product might even not even be any more relevant. I mean, we could say, imagine standing up a virtual, communication tool during the pandemic, you were growing leaps and bounds. Now people are going back to the office. You're obviously going to start to see growth rates slow, and in some cases even stall. And if you're really small, you might not be able to survive. So always keeping a close eye on what is generating revenue today, and will that still be the case 18 to 24 months from now? Now, the question I usually get when I say that is, well, how do I know if 18 to 24 months from now it's still going to be relevant? That goes back to our previous answer, the previous question Daniel asked me, right? Where you start to see around corners when you understand that the job to be done may be constant, but the solution is changing. And so what kinds of solutions are you seeing in other industries which may be relevant for your industry, or in other companies that might be relevant for yours, or products you think you should introduce because it's close enough to the core for you to scale that in a very easy way by selling into your existing customer base. So that is really at the heartbeat of Growth IQ, right? That customer and product diversification is one of those growth paths, because you have to know when it's time to make that move. And the only way you can do that is by understanding the context of your existing business today.
And you mentioned competitive market. The last 4 or 5 years, there was so much capital in the world that they funded millions of startups. As an example, I'm originally from Mexico, and Mexico City, there's over 150 fintechs in Mexico City. So it's really competitive out there. There was so much money. There's too many companies trying to serve the same market. So how do you compete in a very competitive market? Like, if you're in a very competitive market, what you should do as a team to differentiate yourself and really be able to win?
So in that particular example you just gave of 150 unique companies in fintech that you know of, right? There's probably more, but let's call it 150, right? Then you say, you know what? I'm going to roll up a half a dozen of those. I'm going to roll up a half a dozen of those where I feel like culturally there's a fit, strategically there's a fit. We don't totally overlap, so we just end up, stealing from each other's sort of businesses, but it's additive. There might be some layer or percentage of that business that is a head-to-head competition, but if there's a good percentage that is not, I'll just give myself as an example. It was early 2000, and the web was very early, and we were standing up a web hosting company. So we were selling domain names, we were selling web hosting, we were selling email, we were doing it as a service. It wasn't called those things back then, but we got an infusion of capital. We could have just continued to build, or we could have rolled up all these little companies around the country that we knew if we could roll them up all at once and get volume and scale, we could start introducing new products to those existing customers and get growth rates faster than if we were trying to do it in a pure acquisition mode. And the CAC back then was $1. I mean, it was a very different time. So very different time. But what we did was we went out and we rolled up 18 small little hosting companies to give us the scale and volume, the number of customers we needed. The data centers were already built out. And unfortunately, tech wasn't as advanced as it is now, where we could start to do very quick integration. And even having a server that was partitioned across 100 different small businesses. Security back then was very different. So I'm giving that as an example that we could have gone for pure acquisition growth, or we could have gone for, let me roll up for scale. And so in that example you just gave, maybe roll up for scale is one of those options. The second option I would say is partnerships are an untapped opportunity for you to go and strike up partnerships with companies who may have relationships with other customers you may want to get to. And it's a great way for you to get access to those customers in a strong alliance type of relationship, which is another chapter in Growth IQ called partnerships. And then there's one called co-opetition, which is maybe working with a company that you may view as slightly competitive, but you want to cooperate because going after joint customers with a joint solution is better for that customer. And in the end, you'll be better for it. So those are a couple examples, right? You can do the roll up, you can do partnerships, you can do co-opetition, trying to acquire more customers in a more cost-effective manner, especially if you're small and you don't have a big budget. Partnerships may be the way for you to go.
Love, very concrete, great ideas. And by the way, the growth through acquisition. I've been hearing us a lot recently. Vern had a summit last week, online summit, talking about precisely that. And it's the trend because you had all these startups. A lot of them, they were used to get funding and funding and funding. Now they will not be able to get funding based on the new capital requirements, and they're going to have to start merging and be profitable and be acquired. So it's part of the trends of the game.
Yeah, and I would say, look, you can do M&A can be an amazing way for you to get additional capital, talent, capabilities, and customers. But you can get crushed underneath an acquisition if you don't have sort of the muscle mindset to do that. So if you are going to go down that path, this is one where I say, get an advisor, right? Bring somebody in who's done it and done it successfully so that you make sure the due diligence you're doing on the company you're looking to acquire considers culture, talent, people, sort of, and the operating model that they have, because it just doesn't work if you have a culture that's like, go, 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 growth at all costs. And then you acquire somebody who is much more profit oriented. Those two things are create tension in an organization. So you want to make sure that you have somebody who knows what they're doing.
Awesome. Now let me talk about trends. You're at Salesforce and you speak with people in the sales industry all over the world, and you have a lot of data. What trends in sales are you seeing? What's happening in the future? What are you seeing?
Well, I'd say that the sales teams that are winning today are using technology and specifically AI much better than their competition. It was many years ago when I was at Gartner and another analyst firm made the prediction that AI was going to wipe out millions of sales jobs. And I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now, because what we've seen from our research is those high performing organizations that are using AI better than others are actually hiring people, not letting go of people. If you can get sellers to be more productive, there's two stats I'm going to share with you that tell me that we have a lot of room for improvement.
Please.
Only 28% of a salesperson's time is actually spent selling.
Oh, where is spending the other 72%?
So some of it is data entry, right? Which we can try to get some automation. It could be research, which if we could pull in first, second, and third party data into the CRM tool like Salesforce, right? So that the seller is not responsible for that massive amount of data enter. It's tracking down, answers to questions or looking and searching for data. So that integration between tools is really important. It could be that they cross-functionally are being asked to do things like post-sales technical support, because there isn't someone that is responsible for doing that, or they're taking on too much. And so some of it is self-inflicted, because they're doing things they shouldn't be doing, but some of it is they're just not given the right tools and systems and processes to be successful and spend more time selling. The second stat on top of that is only, or I should say 54% of sellers expect to hit quota this in a given year. So if 28% time selling and only 54% of sellers are going to hit quota, you can see that if you could give back some time, you're going to get lift. Now, it's not going to be 1-for-1. If you increase time selling by 10%, you're not going to get 10% on quota attainment. Best in class quota attainment should be in the middle to high 70s, low 80% range anyway, right? You're never going to have 100% of your people hitting 100% of quota, or your quota is wrong, stuff, right? So even between, sort of 50 and 75 or 80, you still have 25 or 30 points of improvement. So if you can give people time back, that's where tools like even Chat GPT, we've got something called Einstein GPT, we've got something called Genie that actually connects data and information cross cloud to push Genie forward. That the information that you will need in real time. We have just-in-time coaching when sellers are getting stuck on a particular activity. So using tech now, regardless of industry, regardless of B2B or B2C, regardless if it's highly regulated or very transactional, will give you that additional leg up. And I don't just say this because of where I work. I say this because we're still extremely under leveraged on the power that technology can actually bring sellers. So that's where I think, I don't want to call it a trend. I want to call it an untapped opportunity.
So I was having a call with a lot of book authors last week about AI and how AI is going to replace writing books and blah, blah.
Yeah.
And one said something that I thought it was brilliant. He said, I know I'm not going to be replaced by AI, but I could be replaced by someone else using AI better than me.
Correct.
So if all these technologies, if they use them well and they could get to 80% of their quota instead of their 28% of the time spending on just selling, they're going to be able to be way more efficient, of course, be able to get to their numbers, and of course, be able to scale their company.
Yeah, some of this is internal inertia, right? Companies and humans don't like change. Change is hard.
Yeah.
And creating new habits takes time. So if you're someone who's been selling for quite a long time, or you're a small business owner that's been really successful up to now, it's to our, we were just talking about getting past 5 million in revenue. How do you make sure that you remain relevant and successful in the future? And if you could have technology remove those mundane, redundant, low skill set tasks off your plate, why wouldn't you do it? And if it could free you up time to do what you were hired to do, i.e. build relationships with customers, right? Solve business problems, whatever it is that your business is doing, then I would think that would bring everybody more satisfaction, right? It would increase the satisfaction for your employees, which in turn increases the satisfaction for your customers.
Brilliant. All right. So let me close with a question, kind of similar to what we started. You said the team is the most important and getting the right team and all that. What are you seeing companies doing to attract and retain the best team members?
Such a good question, because, look, as I started to do the research for Experience Mindset, this was really what we were trying to get to the bottom of. That what we did was we analyzed employee satisfaction scores in publicly traded companies in the US. And then we analyzed customer experience scores, across multiple KPIs that were obviously publicly available. I'm going to use Glassdoor as an example, right? It's where employees can go and, make comments about their company, right, and they rate their company and all those things. And so we had a hypothesis that happy employee leads to happier customer, leads to greater growth rate. Yep. So we could actually see that if the employee satisfaction was down, we could see the Net Promoter Score actually start to dip. If we saw employee satisfaction going up, we would start to see customer experience metrics also increase. When both of those things were going up, we saw faster growth rates, 1.8x, actually faster growth rates.
8x.
1.8.
Okay, 1.8. Okay.
Right. So for $1 billion brand, it was a $40 million impact. So if you're a $5 million brand, it's still $100,000, $200,000 impact. Wow. I mean, it's meaningful, right? It's big. It's big. So,
with the same cost, go straight to the bottom line, or
go straight to the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And so the things that they want is seamless technology and outdated technology was the biggest gap, meaning employees felt like they didn't have the right tools, the right processes, and the right training in place in order to do their job, right? If they had to log into 5 things to answer a customer question, it's not a great experience for the employee. But mind you, if I have to look in 5 places to answer a customer question, the customer's waiting longer. So then it's not a great experience for the customer. So that's kind of a very quick example of how the two are connected. So I would say to you that you have to pay attention to what are the greatest impact on happy employees and satisfaction in employees. And I will tell you, right, that it is that career development, it is seamless technology, it is processes, it is collaboration amongst the company, right? Breaking down those silos, sharing of data and information, and clean and consistent data, because everyone wants to show up and do their job and do it well. And they don't want to waste unnecessary effort and time. So if I would tell you that those are the things, unfortunately, that got ignored. And when the pandemic hit, it really shined a light on the lack of investments we've made on employees. The great resignation and quiet quitting is the result of the lack of those investments. And so I would say, first and foremost, survey your employees and survey your customers. And I don't mean once a year. If you're going to ask your employees a question, take those answers, share what you learned, tell them what you're going to do to fix it, then, celebrate the wins, and then ask them again and ask them again. And you will start to see that there are lots of little things in your company that you're not even aware are happening, because as a leader, you're too far away from those individual contributors most of the time to see what's happening in the day-to-day of their lives. And if you can get closer to that, that's where you start to stay ahead of what's coming 18 to 24 months, because your people are hearing from customers all day, every day, and they know what they're looking for, sometimes more so than you do.
Right. Hey, last question. I just have a follow-up to this. It's expected that the economy is going to slow. We don't know if you're going to be a recession or what's going to happen, but it's expected it's going to slow a little bit. They're restraining cash and trying to lower inflation. And there's a quote that I really like. I think Fittipaldi used to say, when the street is dry, it's very, very difficult to overcome a car. When it's raining, I could overcome 3 and 4 cars. How can we best use this lowest economy for overtake our competitors and do better? What do you do in a slower market?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of making sure that you're constantly looking to build greater resiliency into the business, which then means, are you optimized across those systems and tools? To what we were just saying of that's not increasing the cost if you improve employee and customer satisfaction, right? It's sunk cost, it's going straight to the bottom line. And so if you can look for ways in which you can really optimize the business to deliver the same kinds of results with a lower cost model, or reapplying resources to areas that require your attention, then you're not increasing your cost basis, but you're increasing your productivity, your efficiencies, and ultimately, hopefully, right, your performance from a revenue and profitability standpoint. So, I feel like it's a time where you can do 2 things simultaneously. One, clean up the bad habits of the business that have been accumulated during hypergrowth and free money, right? And then on the flip side of that, a lot of businesses we now take advantage of in 2023 came about in 2008 when we had sort of this last kind of recessionary period. So, don't pull back because your competition is going to double down if they're able. So if you can free up money, it's the time to spend, not just hold on and hope that everything, works itself out in the end. I think if you can do both things at the same time, you will have a much more resilient business on the other side of this, and you will have been investing in future growth today and not waiting for things to calm down, if you will.
Perfect. Love it. All right. Tiffani, always a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Look forward to the Experience Mindset. Indeed, I just bought it. And by the way, super cool. You got the foreword by Tom Peters. That's super cool. Would love to read your book.
Yeah, it was a full circle moment for me. Tom Peters wrote the book, co-authored the book In Search of Excellence. It was the very first business book I read in 1983. And then fast forward, he endorsed my book, Growth IQ. And then he was just kind enough. We've become friends over the years, and he's been kind enough to write the foreword for my next book. Trust me, that is a bucket list item. Check. It doesn't matter. From this point on, it just doesn't matter. It was great.
Congratulations. Super excited. When I saw that, when I purchased the book, I saw that. So very, very cool. Congrats. All right. Tiffani, where can they follow you and learn more from you?
Yeah, so I'm really active on LinkedIn. You'll have to follow me. I'm out of connections. And you can follow me at Twitter at Tiffani_Bova. And then Instagram and Facebook is at Tiffani Bova.
Perfect. Tiffani Bova, Global Customer Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me.
My pleasure.